Even war has rules, boundaries drawn not just by treaties, but by the shared conscience of humanity. These rules are meant to protect those who are most vulnerable when conflict erupts, to ensure that even in the chaos of battle, there are lines that must not be crossed. These are lines humanity insists must not be crossed, no matter the cause or the justification. They are the last defense against total moral collapse. A war crime is not just violence, it's the deliberate targeting of civilians, the wounded, or those who have surrendered. It is the intentional infliction of suffering on those who are powerless to defend themselves, often carried out in the name of strategy or revenge. These acts, torture, starvation, ethnic cleansing, are not random or accidental. They are systematic, planned, and executed with the intent to break the spirit of a people, to erase communities, and to instill fear that lingers for generations. These are not accidents, but calculated strategies to terrorize and destroy. The destruction of homes, schools, and hospitals is often used as a weapon, leaving survivors with nothing but loss and trauma. International treaties like the Geneva Conventions exist to protect the vulnerable, to set standards for how wars are fought, and to hold those who violate these rules accountable. They are the product of decades of hard lessons and unimaginable suffering. But these lines are crossed again and again. Bombs fall on homes, blockades starve cities, and entire populations are forced to flee. The world watches as the innocent are caught in the crossfire, their lives forever changed. The innocent pay the price, children orphaned, families torn apart, communities erased. The scars of war crimes are not just physical but emotional and generational, haunting survivors long after the guns fall silent. Accountability is elusive, but the evidence, shattered lives and mass graves, remains undeniable. Each grave, each ruined home is a silent witness to the horrors inflicted. War crimes are the ultimate betrayal, when the machinery of war is turned against the defenseless, by design. They represent a collapse of the very principles that separate civilization from savagery. They are stains on our collective humanity, reminders that the cost of ignoring these crimes is measured in lives lost and futures destroyed. These are reminders of how thin the veneer of civilization truly is, and how vital it is to defend it, even in the darkest of times. Syria, once a land of ancient cities, bustling markets, and vibrant culture, stood as a crossroads of civilizations for millennia. Its streets echoed with the footsteps of traders, poets, and scholars, and its cities like Aleppo and Damascus were jewels of the Middle East, rich with history and tradition. But in the span of just a few years, Syria became a symbol of modern tragedy, its beauty and heritage scarred by relentless violence and destruction. The Arab Spring ignited hope for change as Syrians took to the streets demanding freedom and dignity. Yet these peaceful protests were met with brutal repression. What began as calls for reform quickly spiraled into a devastating civil war, drawing in regional and global powers, each with their own interests and agendas. By 2022, over 300,000 civilians were confirmed dead, though the true toll is likely far higher, lost in the chaos and rubble. Entire families vanished, neighborhoods erased, and generations left traumatized. The Syrian government unleashed a campaign of terror, dropping barrel bombs on crowded cities, deploying chemical weapons against its own people, and deliberately targeting hospitals and rescue workers. These were not the tragic accidents of war, but calculated strategies to crush dissent and instill fear. Cities that once bustled with life became ghostly ruins. Streets were littered with debris, buildings burned and scarred, and walls bore the desperate messages of those who once called these places home. The violence forced millions to flee, creating one of the largest refugee crises of our time. Families walked for days across dangerous terrain, seeking safety in neighboring countries or distant lands, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Syria's infrastructure, schools, hospitals, homes, was reduced to rubble. Children lost their classrooms, the sick lost their care, and entire communities lost the places that once gave them hope and belonging. The world watched, often powerless or unwilling to intervene meaningfully. Humanitarian convoys struggled to reach those in need, and international efforts to broker peace repeatedly faltered. The Syrian conflict stands as a stark warning. When a government turns on its people, the cost is measured not just in lives lost, but in generations stolen from their future. Children play among ruins, their laughter a haunting echo of what was lost. This is a story of devastation on a scale almost impossible to grasp. The scars of war run deep, and for millions the nightmare is far from over. Syria's catastrophe is a tragedy that continues to unfold before our eyes. Genocide. The intent, not just to kill, but to erase a people. In Darfur, Sudan, this word became reality in the early 2000s. The government armed Janjaweed militias, unleashing terror on non-Arab communities. Villages burned, wells poisoned, families slaughtered. Over 300,000 killed, nearly 3 million displaced, survivors left in sprawling refugee camps. The violence was intimate, systematic, and designed to annihilate. The International Criminal Court charged Sudan's president with war crimes, but justice never arrived. Darfur is a grim reminder: international justice is slow and sometimes never comes. The scars of genocide linger, shaping Sudan's future. The world's promise of never again rang hollow. The echoes of Darfur still haunt us. The 2022 invasion of Ukraine shocked the world, but the conflict had simmered for years, with tensions and sporadic violence in the Donbas region since 2014. For many Ukrainians, war was not a sudden event, but a slow-burning crisis that finally erupted into full-scale devastation. The world watched in disbelief as Russian troops crossed the border, launching a campaign that would reshape the lives of millions overnight. Russian forces unleashed relentless artillery and missile barrages on Ukrainian cities. Apartment blocks, hospitals, and schools became deliberate targets. The destruction was not limited to military sites. Civilian infrastructure was systematically attacked, leaving neighborhoods in ruins and essential services crippled. Families huddled in basements hoping to survive another night as explosions echoed through the streets. The siege of Mariupol symbolized the war's cruelty: civilians trapped, starved, and bombed with no escape. The city became a grim emblem of suffering, where humanitarian corridors were often blocked and basic necessities like food, water, and medicine ran out. Survivors described weeks of terror, hiding in freezing basements as their city was reduced to rubble. Evidence of executions, torture, and forced deportations emerged, with mass graves discovered after Russian withdrawals. Investigators uncovered chilling signs of war crimes: bodies with hands bound, stories of families separated and sent to unknown locations. The scars left behind are not just physical, but psychological, haunting communities long after the fighting moves on. Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed, and hundreds of thousands more wounded or displaced. Families were torn apart as millions fled their homes, seeking safety in neighboring countries or distant cities. The refugee crisis has strained resources and left countless people facing an uncertain future, carrying only what they could grab in moments of panic. The downing of Flight MH17 showed how war's reach is global. Innocents far from the front become victims. The tragedy sent shockwaves around the world, reminding everyone that the consequences of this conflict extend far beyond Ukraine's borders. International outrage followed, but justice for the victims remains elusive. In Ukraine, the line between soldier and civilian is erased by design. Ordinary people, teachers, doctors, shopkeepers, took up arms or supported the war effort, defending their neighborhoods and loved ones. The spirit of resistance united communities but also exposed them to the dangers of modern warfare. The trauma will last for generations. Children grow up surrounded by destruction, families mourn lost loved ones, and the psychological wounds may never fully heal. The war has left an indelible mark on the nation's collective memory. This is 21st century warfare, brutal, relentless, and impossible to ignore. The world cannot look away from the suffering, nor from the resilience of those who endure. The story of Ukraine is a warning, a tragedy, and a testament to the human spirit in the face of unimaginable hardship. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a cycle of violence, history, and heartbreak. The October 2023 Hamas attacks on Israel were brutal, targeting civilians, a war crime. Israel's response in Gaza has been devastating. Relentless bombing, hospitals destroyed, and a humanitarian crisis unfolding. Accusations of war crimes fly on both sides: indiscriminate rockets, collective punishment, and the use of human shields. Gaza's blockade has pushed millions to the brink of famine. Aid is scarce, and hope is scarcer. For families on both sides, the nightmare is unending. Each atrocity fuels the next, leaving only ruin and hatred for the next generation. The world watches, but the cycle continues. War's poison spreads far beyond the battlefield. Civilians become refugees, their lives shattered in an instant. In Yemen, years of civil war have killed hundreds of thousands, most from hunger and disease, not bullets. Blockades starve children and healthcare collapses. For travelers, war zones are landscapes of risk, lawlessness, checkpoints, and constant fear. Even distant nations feel the shockwaves, supply chains break, economies falter, and global costs soar. In 2024, global violence cost nearly $20 trillion, money lost to destruction instead of hope. Peacekeeping receives a fraction of what's spent on war. The ripple effect of conflict diminishes us all. War is never contained, its misery is universal. Every traveler knows the shadow map, places too dangerous to visit. Countries like Russia, Ukraine, Sudan, Yemen, and Syria top the list, torn by war and chaos. In these places, embassies close, insurance is void, and lawlessness reigns. Journalists and aid workers are targeted. For tourists, the risks are even greater. A wrong turn can be fatal, kidnapping, violence, or being caught in crossfire. The people living there are not props for adventure, they endure daily survival. Responsible travel means respecting these realities. The allure of danger is a fool's errand. Sometimes the wisest journey is the one you don't take. For every war-torn nation, there are sanctuaries of peace. Countries like Iceland, Ireland, New Zealand, Austria, and Switzerland top the Global Peace Index. Their secret? Strong institutions, low corruption, and a culture of trust and tolerance. In peaceful societies you feel it, safety, welcome, and the freedom to truly connect. Travel here is about discovery, not survival. The difference is profound. No fear, just curiosity and joy. These places show what's possible when peace is valued. They are reminders of what every country should aspire to be. Choose peace, not just for safety, but for a richer, deeper experience. Why dwell on war's darkest chapters? Because victims can't look away, and neither should we. Travel at its best breaks down ignorance and builds empathy. When we share a meal or a story, strangers become human, not headlines. We must see the world as a network of neighbors, not enemies. War crimes dehumanize. Our resistance is to recognize shared humanity. As travelers, our responsibility is empathy, respect, and learning, even from painful histories. Carry these lessons not as guilt but as motivation to champion peace. We can build walls or bridges. The choice is ours. Let's tip the scales toward beauty, not brutality. Raise a glass to peace, and work to make it real, everywhere.